A very well welcome to all of us who have been able to join in. We are glad to see each and every one of you. And on behalf of the ISSUP Kenya chapter, mine is to encourage you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the session. My name is Sami Ombisa, certified wellness coach and a member of the ISSUP Kenya chapter. The topic for today is entitled The Intersection Between Substance Abuse and Human Trafficking. This webinar is being recorded and all the participants will receive a digital certificate of participation, and the content will also be posted on the ISSUP Global website should you want to have a look at it later on. Please feel free to drop a line in the text box indicating where you are viewing us from. We shall be happy to recognize your location. Now I take this opportunity to introduce our speaker for tonight, who is Ms. Njeri Migwi. Njeri is the co-founder and executive director at the Usikimye, which in Swahili language means speak out. Njeri is also a domestic gender violence survivor and an advocate. And now I welcome you, Njeri, to take the stage and take us through the presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sami. As Sami said, my name is Njeri Migwi. I am the co-founder and executive director of Usikimye. Usikimye is an organization that seeks to end the prevalence of sexual and gender-based violence, that's SGBV, as well as human trafficking in Kenya. And I'm glad to be here. Other than that, we run safe houses for survivors of trafficking as well as of GBV, amongst many programs. But we are on social media, so if you want to search for us, you can do that. And I'm glad to be here today to speak to you about the intersection between substance abuse and human trafficking. And before I go ahead, I just want to introduce you to Nairobi. For those of you who have not been here to a beautiful city, this is how it looks like. And right, so we do not go around chasing giraffes and elephants. We do live in a cosmopolitan area, and you're welcome to come and visit us. And our topic areas today are going to be human trafficking, the risk factors involved, persons in trafficking, substance abuse, identification and referral, impacts and interventions, trauma-informed prosecutions and special forces, as well as safe houses. And to go on ahead, I would like to introduce terms I'll be using interchangeably while I'm talking about human trafficking. And one of them is VOT. VOT are victims of human trafficking. VOTs are people who are still currently in the situation of trafficking, while SOTs are survivors who have already been out of being trafficked and are back into society. They could be in safe houses, they could be in the legal process, but they're no longer within trafficking. So just take a note of those words which I will use interchangeably depending on how I feel the person is within the human trafficking context. So human trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, as well as provision of obtaining a person for labor or services using force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, sex slavery, organ harvesting, peonage, debt, bondage, or slavery. And the money that is always acquired from human trafficking never goes to the person being trafficked, but rather to the trafficker. And we have different forms of trafficking, as we have explained there. You'll find out that a lot of people trafficked for sex trafficking, the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of commercial sex act, whereas the victim trafficking, the VOT, is not paid. Just a minute. Looks like my network might have an issue. Right. And labor trafficking is transportation of victims by coercion or fraud to perform labor. And just to put this in context, any children that are forced, any children below the age of 18, which is the age of maturity in Kenya, are considered sex trafficking victims. So any children below the age of 18 are always considered to be part of the Sex Trafficking Act. And according to the state government, that is the state government of Kenya, in 2020, we had between 20,000 to 40,000 victims of commercial sex, including children here in Kenya. And majority of the victims are trafficked, about 50% are trafficked for sexual exploitation, while those trafficked for labor, about 38%, and the others are criminal activities such as begging. We have a lot of people who are brought into the country. Largely, you'll find that they're disabled, they have leprosy at some point in their life, and they're forced to come and beg for alms in the streets. And this money that they beg, because they elicit a lot of sympathy, goes back to the people who traffic them into the country. We also have forced marriages as well as organ removal. And these are the statistics of human trafficking as late as last year. As you can see, 50% goes towards sexual exploitation, 38%, as I said earlier, is for labor trafficking, while others include criminal activities as indicated, begging, forced marriages, as well as organ removal, among other things that they may force, including selling of drugs, as they may force to indulge in. And I know quite a few people asking, why would you, find yourself being trafficked or be party to trafficking? You will find that some of the reasons include poverty. Of course, a chance of being able to make money will make many people get into coercion or being lured by traffickers, homelessness, gender inequality, political instability, a history of sex abuse, mental health concerns, recently location, which could lead to loneliness, again, which could easily make you vulnerable to being lured, ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences, as well as addictions themselves. And the nature of substance use disorder, which most of you are already aware of. So according to the DSM-5 TR, a substance use disorder, SUD involves an individual, sorry. I'm having a small problem, just a minute. Involves symptoms caused by, I'm sorry, Sami, could you help me a little bit? My apologies. Right. SUD involves patterns.
Would you like to minimize the control panel? Is it blocking your view?
Yes, please.
Yes, at the top of the control panel, above the mute button, there's an orange square with a white arrow. If you click that, hopefully it should shrink it.
That one?
It should be, yes, there we go.
Is it working?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Wow, I've gone up a screen. Can I get back my other screen? I'm sorry. Right. Okay, one more screen. And perfect. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. Right, so I will come back to the role of substance abuse in the lives of people who have been trafficked. And substances play an important role in the lives of these victims. One of the ways that victims are able to cope with the trauma of being in trafficked situations that they did not find themselves being part of willingly is as a coping mechanism. Some victims you will find will use and abuse substances as a response to their trauma of their trafficking victimizations. So for them, substances do offer a temporary relief from their hellish realities. As well as most of the people we've spoken to who are SOTs will tell you that they use substances a lot for functionality purposes. These substances help the victims to work for longer and submit easier to the traffickers' command, which help them make more money. So you will find a victim telling you that I used meth because meth would give me some time, you know, just to be awake so that I could be able to input a lot more work. And then I would definitely use something like heroin to come down from the high that the meth would give me. And then I would be able to sleep. And for us, this presents as a very interesting notion because ideally, substances should decrease occupational functioning, as you know. But however, in these cases, you find that the SOTs who come out of being trafficked will actually insist that substance use did help them increase their capacity to do more work. Right. So what is the connection between, I know you're wondering, what's the connection between human trafficking and substance abuse? So the intersection occurs frequently, especially and among victims of sex traffickers, where traffickers take advantage of the fact that people who with SUDs are more vulnerable to being trafficked. It's more easier, they're more susceptible. All I need to do is have a few drugs, talk to you, and possibly get you into being lured into trafficking. And also you'll find that people who have been victims who have been lured into trafficking for labor may be forced to actually buy, sell, or distribute the drugs. And you will find that some of them being this is the first time they're being exposed to drugs. And obviously, eventually they will start using them. We also find that drug and alcohol traffickers use substances to attract potential victims, groom them, and eventually manipulate them. They leverage on people's substance and drug use to coerce them into trafficking, recognizing that obviously they are more susceptible than people who do not have SUDS. So how does this happen? So we call this identification and referral. That is recruitment through substance abuse, where traffickers may target individuals with existing substance abuse issues to recruit into a trafficking situation. Sometimes traffickers will even wait outside of a rehab clinic with the very thing that the person who has SUDS is waiting for. So for us, it is always important to know the indicators that assist in identifying exploitation and trafficking. It's also important to highlight and comprehend the intervention that could be used to assist in anti-trafficking efforts. And the other challenge that lies with people who have been trafficked, who are also SUDS, obviously, first of all, they're very afraid of the police. They're very afraid because they already know we are users. And so we will not be seen first as trafficked people. We'll first be seen as people who are, abusing substances. So for people like us who do work around trafficking, we say abusing of substances. We know that people who are like you use SUDS. So my apologies for using that. There's an overall lack of comprehension amongst the public. First responders are the people who either see the votes and know how to respond. That could be law enforcement and community service providers that don't understand that sex trafficking is not a choice and that the victim is being forced to cause offense for the economic gain of the trafficker. So there's a lot of misunderstanding because you see this person and you think, oh, this person is doing sex work. But however, what you don't know is the implication behind. They could be doing the sex work because the person who has trafficked them is giving them drugs, so to enable them to be able to do this. So when you see them, instead of seeing a person who is going through trafficking, you see them as a person who is causing offense. So one of the work that we do a lot is changing the mindset of these stakeholders through training and education, which is a critical step to identifying sex trafficking victims as survivors and getting them to much needed support and services. When SUDS are involved, sex trafficking trafficking victims might be unable to engage in traditional court or problem-solving courts. Of course, as I explained earlier, the perception of the public may make them not be able to stand in a court of law and explain how they came and got to be where they're at. And again, trafficking victims may not report the trafficking or other victimization they have experienced to law enforcement because they do not trust criminal justice after, particularly after an arrest. As I explained earlier, because of the situation where they find themselves and how the police also perceive them, most of them are unable to actually say what has happened to them. So one of the things we are hoping for is having specialized team within the criminal justice system that understand the delicate nature of this VOT-SUD, which will yield greater success in giving them and the perpetrators the justice they so deserve. Another issue that always comes up is that there are very few safe houses. So we want to address the safe housing for VOT-SUDs. So while making effort to fill these gaps, we need to create safe houses that meet the considerations below. However, the current safe houses we have are very few and far in between. And these safe houses, like the one we run, provide much needed shelter because when people come out of trafficking and they went into trafficking because of certain situations that were in their life, they possibly don't have a place to go. So we make sure that they get shelter, clothing, food, medical care, as well as rehabilitation services for the ones who are already going through SUD. So this is what we are hoping will become a way for the government as well as other organizations to be able to give care for these particular people. So one would be trauma-informed care. There is a need for safe houses that specialize specifically in VOT, SUDs and their need. A multidisciplinary team, which would consist of specialists needed to work with them. Among them would be trauma counselors, behavior specialists, psychiatrists, psychologists, lawyers, police, and medical practitioners as well. Also, because most people, when they come out of being trafficked, the votes that come out of being trafficked have a lot of, most of them do want to do self-harm. We do have cases where people have tried and attempted to commit suicide, as well as also relapsing back into substance uses. So we hopefully that the housing that they get should have harm reduction strategies, as well as privacy that completely protect both the victims and the witnesses from traffickers or drug dealers who may wish to cause them harm or relapse. And sensitivity training to staff so that they can be able to meet particular needs of this special demographic. And these are some of the interventions that eventually are required for this particular demographic, that's VOT-SUD. Some assistance needs are a consequence of trafficking, while others are linked to vulnerabilities that existed before the victims were trafficked. So these are some of the challenges and intervention that will need to be done, as well as issues that could have arisen in the victim lives after trafficking. Because successful reintegration back into the community takes time and sometimes even years to achieve, reintegration services must be available in the long term and include following up and case management. So what are our hopes? Vocational training, initiation of policy conversation around judiciary reforms so that these people can get the much needed support that they need, as well as economic support because these are people who had been, as I earlier explained, trafficked and they never got any money out of it. Long-term access to healthcare, we find that most of them come back with a lot of issues. People who have been exposed to a lot of labor trafficking, you will find that they're very weak, they're unable, they were not being fed properly. So healthcare and a lot of counseling for them to be able to reintegrate back into society, as well as education. Some of them haven't completed their education. And family mediation, this is so important because sometimes of the misunderstanding that happens between the person who was trafficked and the family and them just trying to reintegrate. You can't just bring them directly from the situation of trafficking back to their family. So we sit and try to talk back to the family and just explain what has happened. This person is not an addict, this and this are the situation that brought them to this place, and just sit on the table and try to hold conversations with the family. We will give you a case example of a 23-year-old female, H, who was addicted to crystal methamphetamine, that's meth, and heroin, and was a victim of serious sex trafficking. What happens to a lot of people who've been trafficked? They get very easily lured back into trafficking. And as H recalls using meth to stay awake in order to service as many men as she could to pay off her debt. The substances helped her cope with her reality when she was in trafficking. Now she's an SOT. H is currently under methadone treatment for SUD and currently resides at Kenya's safe house, which is our safe house, as she's going through her rehabilitation. And hopefully then we can be able to see how her reintegration back into society will look like. And these are some of the references that I used, so you can have a look at them. And are there any questions? We are very welcome to have questions. And thank you very much for listening to me. Back to you, Sami.
Thank you very much, Jerry Mizmi, for that very well articulated presentation. We invite you now to ask any questions that you may have. Welcome. You can post your question on the chat box. I'll be able to see it. You can raise your hand. We'll be able to see you. And then we can have Jerry and also the panelists responding to your questions as they come. So feel free. Let's be engaged now at this point. Any questions? I am happy to have learned a few terminologies. The VOT, SUD, the SOTs also. We can also see how it's very interesting how the traffickers can identify people who have SUDs. This is a very interesting part of this particular session. Quite interesting and learning a lot from it. Maybe I take this to the panelists. Anyone who has a question? We have one, Pius Kiprop, who says, very informative presentation. Thank you very much, ISSUP Kenya chapter.
Sami, if you can hear me.
Yes.
I wanted to request Jerry to, to go over the connection between trafficking and SUD again. At that point, her connection wasn't very good. Those 2 or 3 slides that show how that intersection, if you don't mind.
No problem. I don't mind. Yeah, I feel like I missed something. Right. Just give me a minute. Right, so this one in particular, right? Okay, so I'll start from here, which is where my connection disappeared. According to DSM-5 TR, a substance use disorder, SUD, involves a pattern of symptoms caused by using a substance that an individual continues taking despite its negative effects. Substances used include alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, and opioids. SUD worsens with time, and it's the duty of the diagnosing clinician to determine the level of severity and the appropriate course of treatment, depending on the severity of the disorder. The more diagnostic criteria one meets, the more severe the disorder is. Treatment includes behavioral therapy, medication, and peer support, the 12 step. So, right.
Moving to the next slides, Jerry.
I'm trying to do that. Oh, we're back. A minute. Wow. I have no idea why this is doing there.
So maybe as you continue to figure out that, I can read a question which we can have someone from the panelists trying to respond to it, or even Jerry yourself, or you're back.
Okay. Yes, I am. So we were looking at how SUD prevalences and the types happen. So this is a worldwide a chart. So this tells you what has been happening, and in the past year, according to the website we looked into, alcohol disorder looks like it's the largest with a 16.3 margin. Illicit drug disorder at 6.2, marijuana at 3.5, prescription pain reliever, which is another very big deal, cocaine as well as heroin. This was based around 220 million adults. And again, the criteria for substance abuse disorders, which will be craving to use a substance. This is just among the things that we see. Wanting to cut down or stop but not managing to. Taking the substance in large amounts or for longer, far longer than you're meant to. Neglecting other parts of your life because of substance abuse. Continuing to use even when it causes problems in your relationships, as well as using substances even when it puts you in danger. I think the graphic is very clear on that. And of course, we came back to the role of substance abuse. I think those 3 slides are what I missed on, and how now the intersections happen, and about how substance play a very important role in the life of SOT. Right. I think I'm done with the 3 slides that I missed.
Okay.
Back to you, Sami.
Very nice, very nice. So we have some questions coming in. We have one from Shipramburu. Says, thank you for your presentation. My question is, the line is very thin between our clients with SUD and trafficking. How can we ask addiction professionals to support the victim? I had posed that question to Albert. However, we can have you, Jerry, respond to it, and Albert as well.
Albert, is it still on?
No, Jerry, please
Could you
answer
repeat the question?
Okay.
Could you repeat the question for me, please?
Okay. The question is from Shipra Mburu. He says, thank you for your presentation. My question is, the thin line is, there's a very thin line between our clients with SUD and trafficking. How can we, as addiction professionals, support the victim? So I think it's like trying to ask how the professionals who provide services for people with SUDs can be of help to those already in trafficking or those who are survivors in that area.
For us, once we get the VOTs, mostly they're brought to us by either the trafficking police, the anti-trafficking police, or by the government because they've been rescued from the situation of trafficking. So I think for you, the role you can play as people who work with people with SUDs is, first of all, find out how this person got to be in the place they're in the space they're in. Then if you find out this could be a VOT or an SOT, then you should be able to contact people like us so we can be able now to know how best to support them, because people who've been trafficked have very different needs from just people who have regular SUDs. I don't know whether that helps, because they need different kind of care, different kind of reporting mechanisms. They even have specialized police who work with us, the people who give the other side of services for SOTs. Yeah. So if you do come across somebody who probably being trafficked, because sometimes they've been brought to hospital by their traffickers in case things are a little bit too much for them and they still feel like this person has a use to them, then it would be important for you to contact organizations like us so that then we can be able to also assist them on the other side. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Jerry. Any addition from the panelists? Well, that's good. So the next question is from Harriet Addo, and this is directed to you, Jerry. She's asking, do you have victims suffering from post-traumatic? Do you have victims suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of going through the process of trafficking? And how do you deal with that situation?
Most of the victims who come out of trafficking, because their lives have been changed completely, do have PTSD. So what we do work with is a lot of both psychiatrists and psychologists, as well as counselors, to help them readjust to the reality of their life now. So that's why they stay in the safe houses as long as 1 year, especially if they're Kenyans or if they're not being taken back to their countries of origin, because we also do receive non-Kenyan votes into us. So our work purposefully is just to provide for them the shelter, but then we do work with government appointed psychiatrists as well as psychologists who know and who have worked with victims of trafficking. For example, Dr. Jackie, she's been one of us for a while from Kisima Wellness. She's aware of what happens and is able to provide the much needed support that these SOTSs need, especially in terms of any other psychological aspects that they have gone through.
Okay. So we have another question from Masego Lecha, and is asking, so does that mean victims of human trafficking need specialized safe houses?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. The safe houses that they need cannot be the same as other victims or other survivors. It needs to be, they need to be very well protected, because not only are they survivors of trafficking, they are also sometimes state witnesses against the traffickers, who most of the time have enough money and enough clout to buy themselves and get away with cases of what the things they have done. So they need specialized care and specialized safe houses which cannot be identified from outside of the houses, in order for their safety as well as the safety of this. You realize they're also witnesses, so we're also looking into it as a witness protection safe house, basically.
Thank you very much. Another question again from Shiframbulu is asking the presenter, do you do training for other professionals on trafficking? Where are the trainings done?
Ourselves, personally, we haven't had any human trafficking trainings, although UNODC as well as IOM do hold trainings. And these training are specialized training already to people within the trafficking community, should I say it that way, trafficking community, that is for us as service providers, also to organizations that deal with trafficked people, as well as to the police. And sometimes I'm seeing that we are opening up more and more towards people, let's say medical practitioners, like the doctors who treat the victims, as well as psychiatrists and psychologists. I'm seeing a lot of it being opened up to the ones, especially to the ones who are already working with us in the trafficking community, as well as I'm seeing it open up a bit more to professions like yours, which I'm assuming are within the counseling. And hopefully if one comes up, we will let your ISSUP, we will probably get in touch with you.
Thank you very much. We have another question from Murugi Ndungu, who says, what is the biggest challenge or challenges faced by Usikimye in its rehabilitation and housing of VOT SUDs?
First of all, the support that we most likely require from especially the police, because their first thing, the first idea is when they get in touch with the traffic victims, they treat them obviously as suspects before they realize, oh, they are not really suspects. These are people who've been trafficked. So you find that by the time the VOT SUD is reaching to you, their state is so bad. So that's one of the things that is a challenge. The other challenges are, of course, getting the right professionals and getting the right treatment, and as well as relapses. Relapses occur. You would not believe that. You would assume this is a clean home, everything is running well, but by the time you remove them, maybe sometimes you're taking them to the government rehabilitation facilities, because those are some of the places that we take them. You don't know where they get the drugs, but somehow sometimes they're able to access the drugs, and this again leads to relapses. So and also the fact that they also get very codependent and then they are unable to function outside of the safe houses. So those are just some of the challenges that we get, and obviously funding is always a big challenge for some of the work that we do.
Thank you very much for that response. We have Charles Kinudia, who's asking, many substance abusers are reluctant to go for treatment. How do you get victims to the treatment?
As I said, for us, our victims are different. Our survivors are very different because they are brought directly to our organizations. Then we are able to go through the assessment that they need, so that we're able to know, are they going directly to the safe house in case these ones are not part of the ones that use substances, or are we taking them directly to the rehabilitation center? So sometimes from the time they land, because some of them have been trafficked out of the country, some of them have been trafficked into the country, they go through the assessment, and then from there now we identify where they are at in their journey, and then from there then we're able to directly take them. It's not even a discussion, because that's a government mandate for us who give the support to VOTS, that they have to go to a rehabilitation center that sometimes is supported by the government. So depending on where the person is at, it's compulsory for them to, as we say, dry out before now they can come to the safe house or any other support.
Thank you very much. Another question, Job Maina is asking, he's saying, thanks, Jerry, you have helped my clients in the past. As a person coming from a rehabilitation background, is it possible to develop a gender-based violence program for practitioners?
Yes, it's very much possible. We can do that. So we can sidebar and look into doing that together.
Okay. Thank you for the response. Next, we have Vincent Munyoki, who's asking, you have indicated the challenge of judicial system. How have you helped them in giving support?
The support we give, again, is, first of all, is we are sheltering the VOTS. And after sheltering, we also now help them with getting a lawyer who's going to be able to present their case in court. So we're able to, one, take them from the safe houses to the court and back to the safe houses where they're safe until they can be able now, maybe their case is finished, and then, you know, for them to now transition from the safe house to being a functional person within the community. So that's the kind of support we provide, ensuring they go to court, their court dates are met, ensuring that they have lawyers who can help them with the court cases, because sometimes there's also a very thin line between you being victim and you being victimized by the government, to where you're being forced, because roles in trafficking do differ. Sometimes, even as a person who has been victimized, you will find that you have been given a role by the traffickers, which is, for example, you could be the madam running the house, but you are already a victim of you already, you know, victimized in the first place. So you find that sometimes the government does not look at that role. They just want to arrest you because they got you madam, not realizing that you're just a pawn in the grand scheme of things. So a lot happens, and we make sure that we are able to screen and to differentiate what role did this person really play before they are considered a suspect in a case.
Thank you very much, Njeri. We have another one from Faith Chukuji. She's asking, please, what are those interventions that could be used to assist in anti-trafficking efforts?
First of all, for those of us who live in Africa, I do not know whether you realize that there is a lot of people going out of Africa to get jobs outside of, most probably in the Middle East, in India. India plays a very large role in sex trafficking. So one of the things I feel we need to also add, maybe probably into a curriculum for college or for even high school, is to talk about trafficking, because I see a lot of young people leaving the country, getting into airplanes and just going into other countries, not being aware that some of these job agencies that, you know, look like they're giving them something are actually not. And these are some of the people that find themselves in situation of, you know, of victimhood, where they have been trafficked without even knowing, because immediately they land on the other side, their passports are taken away, and they find that, oh, now you have to pay. Like, for example, H that I was describing, she found herself in a situation where she was being told you have to pay 300 lakh in India, and she had been told she was going into getting a job into a mall. So one of the things that we need to be very aware of is this mushrooming of agents that take people into the Middle East. Most of them are not legitimate businesses. So this is something that we are in negotiation with our government to be able for them to curb trafficking. So hopefully that can be a mechanism, because most of these trafficked people, it's all about promises of joy and glory to the other side. So if we could be able to teach the youth and let them understand that trafficking is there, because most people are not even aware of it, then that could also help in them making the right choices for themselves.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers Faith. We have another question from Felista Jepkoskei, who is asking, is it right to force a person with SUD to go into treatment, and what is the probability of relapse? What is the probability of relapse if the person is forced into treatment?
You see, I wish I could say that we are given a choice about this. Once the VOTS SUD come into your offices or into your space, there are people there, right there, like policemen who are there waiting to know, are we taking these people in or are they going to jail? So it's not like you're really given much of a choice about this, because where they've been found and the circumstances under which they have been found means the police need to be able to identify who are the victims in this case, who are the perpetrator, because sometimes both of them, you will find them at the same time. So for us, our work is first to screen and to be able to know. And because you cannot just have somebody who is an SUDS into your safe spaces, and the government also is demanding of this person to be able to do ABCD, then one of the things that you have assigned MOU with the government is they need to go into rehabilitation. And if they refuse, they're actually taken to jail. So there's nothing much we can do about that. because the government wants to know the answers, what's happening, what was the role that you played in this? Are you a victim or are you a perpetrator? So sometimes it is what it is. So for us, it's just to make sure that they are given trauma-informed care, and also that they're not re-traumatized. And yes, a lot of them do get into relapses, and that is where the role of the shelters come in. I hope that answers that question, unfortunate as it is.
Thank you very much, Jerry. We have another question from Olubenga Mabo, is asking, how are the lawyers paid, considering that some of the victims may not have money?
We have pro bono lawyers who work, for the organization, and we also have our own lawyers who are able to support these cases, especially from within the trafficking. As I said, trafficking community, we do have specific lawyers who actually deal with cases of human trafficking. So they're not paid from the victim doesn't have any money. By the time they come here, they have zero money, zero anything of any sort. So this is paid by the Trans-Alliance community of trafficking.
Thank you very much, Jerry. We have one Thanksgiving, nice presentation. I've learned a lot. That's coming from Catherine Ngugi. And then we have a question from Passing Nankula, who says, do you have a standard period for the treatment program?
It varies. One, it varies from how the person is able to respond. I know that for the ones with SUDSs, they first stay in the rehab center for about 3 months, and then now they're brought to the safe house. And standard staying time is about 6 months in the facility within the safe house. And then now we start to do family tracing, contact tracing, and try to see which people they are. And then now the next 6 months is in reintegration into the community. So it takes about a year from the time they get into your hands to the time you reintegrate them into the society.
Great. Another question now from Ibrahim Sabo Adam, who says, good presentation. Please, can you share with us some of your success stories since inception?
Yeah, we have a few success stories. One of the success stories that we have are the Indonesian SOTs that were recovered in Mombasa, there was a brothel being run. It took a long time, about 5 years, for the case to finish successfully and to win the case, and for each and every one of those SOTs to be repatriated to back to their country of origin. So for us, that's a big success story within the trafficking fraternity, because it had a lot of people with a lot of power and a lot of money, and it looked like we were never going to win for the 13 ladies that had been trafficked into this country for purposes of sexual trafficking. And they're back in their countries, and took 5 years. So that's one of our success stories in the trafficking fraternity. And for some of us, we have individual, stories of people who've been trafficked, who've come back, who've even gone back to school. We have one who is back in school, who is trying to talk. We also have something called ISSUP Kenya, which is a survivor-led. And by survivor-led, I mean people who have come from situations of trafficking and are now taking lead into helping other survivors of trafficking by helping them reintegrate, helping them meet. They have a meeting point where they meet and talk about the things that they went through and give each other strength. So for me, I think that's a very, very good success story for us.
I hope that answers Ibrahim Sabo. We have another question from Namazi Christine Betap. She says, Sami, Wasake from Uganda, what measures do you have in place to guarantee what the facility stays unknown to the perpetrators? I repeat the question. What measures do you have in place to guarantee that the facility stays unknown to the perpetrators?
How you move the victims, how you move the survivors from the safe house to wherever it is that they're going. That's very, very important. And we also keep on shifting. So that's one of the ways that you ensure that they do not have access to them. Is how do you move them? You do not just get into a car and you're directly taken to the facility now. You get into a car, we take you somewhere, then another car takes you somewhere. It's things around that. It's all very hush hush. So I wouldn't even discuss it further, but no, we do not allow them to know where these houses are, and they do not stay in one place long enough for them to really, really be discovered. They could be in our safe house, they could be in another organization safe house, you never know. That way we keep it, we keep the anonymity on what we do from the offenders.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers Namazi. Christine, we have one Thanksgiving from Faith Nkechi Chukwi G, who says, thank you very much for the presentation. And right now we are at 7 minutes to time. Any other question from the panelists maybe, or any other person who was the last question?
Jerry, thank you so much for the presentation. There is a question from Thembim Sane asking about success rates for the clients who've been trafficked and rescued, and how long, well, you answered the question about how long the treatment takes, but what are your success rates? And he's also asking about if you could share about the legal process that they go through.
Okay. I think I shared about the success rate and the success stories that we have had, but I'll also say that with trafficking, you're not just looking at, what we do is try as much as possible to approach this issue holistically and see what issue did this person really have that we can be able to resolve so that they can be able to reintegrate back into society. So those issues, if they are correctly answered, then you're looking at a success story. And again, our hope for our SOTs is they do not get to be re-trafficked again. That's basically our biggest hope, that they're not vulnerable to being lured or used to lure other victims into trafficking. So the other question about the legal process. It depends. Has the perpetrator been arrested? And if the perpetrator is arrested, are they willing to, one of the things you know about trafficking is you can never force them to be witnesses because they are afraid of the perpetrators. So basically, it's just like any other court process, just that. Most of the people who've been trafficked serve as witnesses into the people that perpetrated this. And most of them are very afraid. And sometimes we never really, really get to see who the end person, the end perpetrator, the people who really benefit from trafficked people. Sometimes you see some of them come from, let's say, Saudi Arabia, where they were trafficked, or some of them come from India. So we never really get sometimes to get the other perpetrator. So sometimes justice is not served. That's why we are saying the case that happened for the 13 Indonesian women was a great success for us in the trafficking fraternity. Otherwise, it does go like any other case. The only problem with trafficking cases is the proof of being trafficked lies with the survivor. How did this happen? So sometimes that does lead to re-traumatization, even for them being in court. And obviously, because some of these cases take very, very long. And the survivors sometimes give up or they're threatened in case they've already left, the shelter mechanisms. But otherwise, it is like any other regular court case. However, it is mostly done sometimes in chamber, depending on the case and the number of threats that also happen to some of us because of these cases. So sometimes you will find that the case is being done in chambers or the witnesses are being very well protected. So you would, everybody else is told to leave the court so that the witnesses can give can give their evidence or their testimony. It's done in, if you've been to some of our courts, there is a court box. So the person who is giving the witness statement is sometimes not seen in case of very, very high cases of, being trafficked. I hope that answers.
Thank you very much, Jerry. We have one question. If Albert, you could help just respond to it in 1 minute from Mr. Urbanus, who is asking what are the factors contributing to relapse of SUDs in Kenya? 1 minute to respond, then we conclude the session. Albert?
All right. Well, that is a multifaceted question, but I'd say the biggest issue is the level of motivation for change, because substance use disorder is multifaceted and complicated. But also next to that is exposure to triggers that may lead them back into the craving, the cycle of craving and using, and also the presence or absence of what we call recovery capital. So the support system and the support network around them, which I think is what Jerry is part of. What she's doing is part of recovery capital. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone who made it today into this session. We are glad that you stayed with us until the end. Thank you very much, Ms. Jerry, for putting aside your work just to be with us and be part of this ISSUP Kenya family. We really appreciate you. On behalf of the ISSUP Kenya chapter, thank you so much. And thank you very much all the ISSUP members who have joined in from other parts of the globe. We really appreciate you. We thank you also the ISSUP Kenya members who have been able to join us this evening. And lastly, any other attendee who was with us today, we really appreciate you all. May I just wish you a nice evening, even as we conclude this session. Enjoy the rest of your evening and see you again in the upcoming ISSUP sessions. Thank you very much. See you next time.